can you have political freedom if you're still being controlled by outside interests?
So when you think about who's controlling your ports, who's controlling food distribution, who's controlling these mineral resources, and so it is not very much on the surface and easily available information. So as I kept digging deeper, I had to do global research on resources to see that the model was not just unique to the Bahamas. And so even though you have majority black government, you have to think about who's funding your elections.
Is it possible that we may be giving a $13.3 billion publicly trading company free access to our natural resources without getting a dollar?
You have billions of dollars in limestone, for example. That's just one resource that is exported out of the country. In our national budget, it does not even show up.
Most people hear about the Bahamas over here, but they don't realize the Bahamas is a country made up of 700 islands and 2,300 keys. So most of the Bahamas is the marine environment. You know, it spreads out over 100,000 square miles. The majority of it, at least 85% of the Bahamas, is a vast amount of shallow area, and also you have very deep oceans that run through those many islands that make up the Bahamas. To know my true history and not what we were told, because we were told many false stories about Africa. The Bahamas is a very beautiful, special country, but we struggle with many of the same issues of fighting for equality and a better way of life for the majority of the citizens, you see. As I traveled throughout the many islands, I would hear, stories from the elder folks. So I always wanted to learn about our history, and they were talking about how their land was being stolen from them. And then I remember fishing a gentleman, the Duke of Wellington, and he wanted to donate monies to get areas protected on the island where I live, which is Andros, the largest of the 700 plus islands. But when I went to the headquarters of the organization that was in charge of so-called conservation, I noticed that these were all colonial families, and I was still confused. When I looked at all the names, it started to come back to me that these were some of the names that I would hear on the various islands, that their land was being stolen from them. So I said, I'm thinking about conservation, about empowering people, but the history of these individuals was just the opposite. It became crystal clear to me when I saw that most of the gold came from Africa, platinum, the diamond, the cocoa, and just a whole range of resources. And then the countries that was behind it, that I knew that Africa was exploited, or we were enslaved, not because of the many stories or lies we were told. It was because it is the richest continent in the world, and where most of these other places, they survive of the resources of Africa, one way or the other.
Why is it that 5,000 units of our currency is worth 1 unit of your currency, where we are the ones with the actual gold reserves? The Western world depends on Africa in every possible way, since alternative resources are scarce out here. So how does the West ensure that the free aid keeps coming? By systematically destabilizing the wealthiest African nations and their systems, and all that backed by huge PR campaigns. leaving the entire world under the impression that Africa is poor and dying and merely surviving on the mercy of the West. Well done, Oxfam, UNICEF, Red Cross, Life Aid, and all the other organizations that continuously run multi-million-dollar advertisement campaigns depicting charity porn to sustain that image of Africa. While one hand gives under the flashing lights of cameras, the other takes in the shadows. We all know the dollar is worthless, while the euro is merely charged with German intellect and technology. How can one expect donations from nations that have so little? It's super sweet of you to come with your colored paper in exchange for our gold and diamonds. But instead, you should come empty-handed, filled with integrity and honor. Last year, the IMF reports that 6 out of 10 of the world's fastest growing economies are in Africa, measured by their GDP growth. Foreign exchange reserves from African countries based on colonial debt they forced them to pay. Former French President Jacques Chirac stated in an interview recently that we have to be honest and acknowledge that a big part of the money in our banks comes precisely from the exploitation of the African continent. In 2008, he stated that without Africa, France will slide down in the rank of a third world power. However, in nature, any species that is overhunting, overexploiting the resources they depend on as nourishment, natural selection would sooner or later take the predator out because it offsets the balance.
I've been talking about our natural resources as an integral part of the solution to our social and economic challenges from day one. And that has never changed. I believed then, and I still do believe now, that is where our new streams of revenue will be discovered. This debate is about the black, the gold, and the aquamarine. This is about what I believe is best for the Bahamas, for Bahamians from Grand Bahama to Inagua, and from Bimini and the Berry Islands to Maguana. As the member for Centerville alluded to, I also grew up with the familiar words of the song, "This land is my land. This land is my land. This land is your land. This land was made for you and me." I grew up believing those words, Mr. Speaker. But as an adult, as I reflect, I realize that like many other Bahamians, I got swayed. Much of this land, Mr. Speaker, does not belong to the average Bahamian. To believe that, in my opinion, is a dream, it's a fallacy, it's a farce. It's wishful thinking. And will soon become a nightmare if we continue in the present trajectory, in my opinion. I'm standing today, Mr. Speaker, heartbroken, disappointed, sometimes feeling helpless and almost hopeless, but for a God who is just, who is omnipotent, who is sovereign. He is in control. I cannot explain why I've been so persistent, so passionate in speaking about our natural resources. But there was always an inner force driving me, compelling me to keep doing it. And I did. Mr. Speaker, all I consistently would hear was, there's nothing to Aragonite. Accept it. Move on. They lied to you. People are talking but cannot prove anything. Talk is cheap. Mr. Speaker, if you recall, it was during the recent budget debate, the Wednesday, the 10th of last month, when I tabled this document that ranked the Bahamas number 66 in total trade value. I presented it, I tabled it, and I asked the question several times, what is this? Through April, there's a total of 1.14 billion. Exports total 1.03 billion. I can consistently ask, I even held it up to, what is this? What is this? I didn't get any answers. But Mr. Speaker, the Bible says, ask and it shall be given. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the doors shall be opened. I was obedient to that divine spiritual law found in Matthew 7:7. Mr. Speaker, I asked, and I was amazed at the answers that I got. And I will gladly share them. And I too intend, Mr. Speaker, at the conclusion, to table this document. Mr. Speaker, my focus on a natural resource is that of the limestone, which we call quarry or curry, which is rich in calcium carbonate. Mr. Speaker, limestone activities points of fact. There are some principal foreign entities, buyers among them, Martin Marietta Materials Incorporated, DuPont, Kinder Morgan Terminals, the CSL Group and CSL Americas, United States Customs and Border Protection, Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States. Mr. Speaker, Martin Marietta Materials Incorporated is a natural resource-based building material company. Their headquarters is in Raleigh, North Carolina, United States of America. Martin Marietta is traded on the New York Stock Exchange and is number 187 on the S and the P500 index. As of the market closed on Friday, July 3rd, Friday past, the company has a market capitalization of $13.3 billion US, as reported by the New York Stock Exchange. On May 5th, 2020, the company reported in its first quarter results of $958.2 million, of which $831.1 million was from its building materials business. The company supplies aggregates from its network of more than 300 quarries, mines, and distribution yards throughout the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean islands, including the Bahamas. The company has long-term agreements with shipping companies to provide ships to transport their aggregates from the Bahamas. Of the more than 300 quarries, 124, they own the land free of major encumbrances. The natural question would be, are any of these lands in the Bahamas? 59 are owned in part and leased in part. Are any of these lands in the Bahamas? If so, are they owned in part with whom? Leased from whom? 109 and the 9 are leased land. Are any of these direct leased land in the Bahamas? If so, leased from whom? There are 10 10 land properties that are neither owned nor leased, where raw materials are removed under an agreement, or any of these lands in the Bahamas? Is it possible that we may be giving a $13.3 billion publicly trading company free access to our natural resources without getting a dollar? Not even receiving a dollar to buy one common share of their stock that closed at $213.49 on Friday past. Mr. Speaker, DuPont uses calcium extracts from limestone for pig and poultry diet formulation. I repeat, DuPont uses calcium extracts from limestone for pig and poultry diet formation. Kinder Morgan Terminals is a provider of limestone to Dome Technology Incorporated, an industry leader in concrete dome construction. CSL Group, CSL America, shipping company, the leading provider of marine dry bulk cargo handling and delivery services. Just recently, we signed a long relationship that got longer. Earlier this year, with Martin Marietta signed a multi-year extension for their freight contract with CSL Americas. The aggregates are listed in construction as well as highway and infrastructure projects throughout the United States.